You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show and podcast. And yes, I am your host, Rick Franzi. And do we have a good show planned for you today? Why do you ask? Well, because David Scieszka is our guest. He is the founder of Vertical Longevity Pharmaceuticals. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rick. It's great to be here.
So whenever I have a founder on the show, I have to start with your origin story. What did you see? What was the inspiration, motivation you had to launch your firm?
I appreciate the question. It's kind of an interesting story, actually. I got my scientific start in the Army, which is not typical as a psychological operations specialist. On a deployment, we were basically census takers. We would take age, do you have access to healthcare, schools, what have you. And so I noticed a trend. People with access to healthcare, they aged at a normal trajectory, and people without access to healthcare, farmers in the rural areas, they actually aged at an accelerated trajectory. And so I thought, as an Army guy, as a young kid, oh my God, I figured it out, and we're going to go solve this problem. And I, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, got out of the Army, found out a lot of brilliant people are actually working on that exact same issue, the access to healthcare, but they weren't necessarily focused on aging. And so then that got in my head, what is aging? How do we fix it? Got a biotech undergrad, computer science, trying to figure out the aging, progressed through the biomed PhD focused on aging, and then an MBA. So I've always wanted to help people. That's why I was in the Army, trying to help people with the psychological operations. Then I got the aging aspect, trying to help people as well. And now the MBA, being able to translate these therapies into humans so that we can help the most amount of people possible in aging, which affects everybody.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, aging it's a reality. So what have you learned? Any pivots to the business since you launched it? And can you kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, we have pivoted so many times, not necessarily in our therapy, because we have a vaccine, and so it does what it does. It targets a fundamental driver of aging, called senescent cells. Happy to talk about any of the aging stuff. That is definitely the background. But for the listeners, the therapy itself didn't change. More of our messaging changed, because if we target aging to an investors, they won't necessarily understand that it's not the fountain of youth. If you start off on the level of aging and then bring somebody back down to atherosclerosis, or like the clogging of arteries, there's a major setback there, because their expectations are set so high, and then having to shift backwards, it feels like a backpedal. So investors were not enthused by the idea of targeting aging and then targeting atherosclerosis instead. So we've had to pivot our message completely and align it to the investors themselves. There's going to be an investor that's focused on the cardiometabolic aspects of our vaccine. There's going to be investors focused on the cardio aspects, and then there are longevity investors too. And so we've had to tailor the message to each individual background. And that was a major pivot point. But then also the funding itself. So we were originally trying to raise $4 million, and that was too much too fast, giving way too high of a percent of the company, and that was just a misalignment. So all of these things, all of these little puzzle pieces, we've had to form over time, and I would definitely call those pivots. But it's been a really fun journey getting to where we are now. Yeah, and all the pivoting is just part of that journey, I think.
Yes, out talking to the venture capital people can be an interesting experience, and one that I'm glad that you learned from. You have to learn to adapt and modify, and keep trying, keep talking, see if it lands.
Yeah. As part of that, I actually I worked for the Life Science Angels. I'm not sure, have you heard of the Life Science Angels group?
Only through our conversations.
Yeah, worked for the Life Science Angels to try to understand both sides of that, the funder side of the table and the founder side of the table, to align our, of course, message and our fundraise with investors and what they're really looking for. So another major pivot was to understand that investors, at the end of the day, they have to make money. That's their job.
Mm.
And so many of them are focused in a humanitarian sense. That's why they got into investing. They want to see these therapies get to market to help people, but they're beholden to limited partners. They're beholden to people that they fundraised from in a fiduciary responsibility. So for us, we have to make sure that we align our trajectory and our return. They have to be able to see that so clearly. Otherwise, we could be just another one of a million companies that they see, aging or not. Yeah, just because we're targeting aging, we don't get a special pass. We have to show them where these returns are going to be, and that's, I think, a major pivot point that not every founder recognizes as fast, or potentially ever, if in the case where the company doesn't actually take off. But that's definitely one of the major pivot points that we had to recognize early on.
So earlier in our conversation, I heard you say a vaccine for aging. And so now I need you to take apart Vertical Longevity Pharma and really what problem are you solving? What are you working on? Who do you help? Just give us a mini investor pitch here about the company, if you will.
Yeah, to a broad group, I would say we are the roto-rooter for clogged arteries. We've developed a vaccine that can unclog arteries, and we do so by targeting a cell type that surrounds these clogs. And so your immune system activates, clears out these cells for you, and the overall outcome is a reduction in the clogs, of course. But because we're targeting a fundamental driver of aging, it's actually whole organism benefits. And every single organ and system that we've monitored has seen a therapeutic benefit. We can talk about metabolic disorder, chronic kidney disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, in the lung space, pulmonary fibrosis. It's because these cells drive aging and they're pro-inflammatory. So their elimination, natural elimination by your immune system, we've just seen therapeutic benefits. They've been implicated in numerous different disease types, but we have to narrow the window down the messaging. So in a broad sense, we are targeting atherosclerosis first, which is the leading cause of global mortality, the clogging of arteries. After that gets approved, we can then start talking about the other indications that we can go after, including health span. Health span is what we got into this for, and that's the difference between lifespan is the total number of years that you live from 0 to 85, maybe hopefully longer. And then health span. Health span is the number of years that you can live in good health within that lifespan. And so by targeting a root cause of aging, a root cause of age-related diseases, we're extending health span hopefully out until the exact moment that you perish. But necessarily we will extend lifespan too. But overall goal is to extend health span as much as possible. 100, 120. Because if someone were to ask you, Rick, would you like to live to 120? Do you think you would?
Well, I think you answered the question previously. If you have your health, why not?
Mhm.
Like if you're reasonably functioning at that age and mentally and physically and you're enjoying life, why wouldn't you want to live as long as you can? It's when the health span is shorter than the lifespan that gets to be an unattractive alternative, I think.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And so I think the optimizing of the health span should be a critical focus, and it is a critical focus for a lot of longevity companies. Now it's coming around, which is great to hear, and especially the longevity clinics locally as well.
So you've hit on something that clearly has major health implications if proven to be so, right?
Mhm.
How do you not how do you fight as an entrepreneur the tendency to want to talk big picture when you're really in the early days needing to focus on the pragmatic little picture, the ROI, if you will, off of the investment? How do you balance both opportunities?
Yeah. Geez, that's a really good investigation into the rhetorical triangle, the audience, receiver, and message, and being able to structure in a way that the receiver of the message can understand and actually recognizes the opportunity. We've run the numbers, and that's another thing. So we have to do our own due diligence on the process itself. So we've run the numbers. Chronic kidney disease would be an incredibly cash efficient method to get to the clinic and to get FDA approval. Chronic kidney disease. But when you tell investors I have a vaccine against chronic kidney disease, they're not as excited. And this has been because we've been able to go through uh, the ICOR program. I'm not sure if you've heard of the ICOR program, but it's
Oh,
an intensive, not NSF, National Science Foundation. They have you go through in 3 months, interview 100 people. And within those 100 people that we interviewed, I asked them an A/B testing kind of thing. Are you excited about a vaccine against chronic kidney disease, or are you excited about a vaccine against atherosclerosis or the clogging of arteries? And hand over fist, people were way more excited about the unclogging of the arteries. So although it's more cash efficient to go one way, we had to do our homework to understand that atherosclerosis is a much more exciting, a much more enticing avenue. And so that gets back to that rhetorical triangle. We have to understand the current market are offering the capabilities, and we have to address the pain points, and then at the same time get people excited about it. Because if we're not excited about it, how are we going to make anybody else excited about it either? This no one's going to get on board.
right. Right. So it's I could spend so much more time wanting to learn from you, the reality of what you're doing. Maybe that's a conversation for another time, David, because we have a limited time here on the show today. But so I'm wondering, as an entrepreneur and a founder, have you ever felt alone or maybe isolated in this journey as you're launching your firm?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I've heard this from many people. My background in psychology, it allowed me a lot of self-examination time, and the ability to recognize, take a look at myself from outside perspective, to recognize what I was at risk of doing and at risk of falling into, and the isolation. So I've got a computational background, and so I've spent half my career embracing AI, embracing machine learning methodologies, elastic net regression, what have you. And so I don't want to sound like I'm an anti-AI guy. That's why I mentioned it. I am very on board with this AI revolution, but it's exacerbated by GPT. And so the founders that I've talked to anyway, who've been doing this a long time, they say that they felt isolation between their computer and the person on the receiving end. And so it's very easy to feel like you're in this isolated tower because you don't have as much human interaction. And this gets made worse by the overlay of GPT. Now we're talking to GPT, and GPT is writing our messages to everybody else. And so I've taken a step back, recognized the tendency for me to fall into that, and instead gone the opposite way. So I personally tailor my messages on LinkedIn, and I personally write my emails. They're grammatically adjusted by GPT, but it's all me. And
Mm.
so I'm alleviating a lot of that isolation because every positive response I get, I know it's my doing as opposed to this AI model's doing. It's me. Anytime you hear or see an email, it really is me. Anytime you reach out on LinkedIn, it's me. And so that's been alleviating a lot of this loneliness. And then interactions like this. I love meeting people and even being able to see a fellow human face. It's so elevating of my mood, and it's just all of that isolation and loneliness. It goes right out the window. So thanks so much for having me on today as well. This is a lovely reprieve from the drudgery of being so isolated, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the unintended consequences of the streaming platform that we're using and the technology. It's a great, thoughtful answer to that question. So I'm wondering if you have a great answer to the next question, which is, what's the best piece of business advice or that you would ever receive, something that's been valuable for you that you could pay it forward to our audience?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would not be here if it hadn't been for so many different contributors and mentors along the way. Um, I owe my career to so many different people, and I would love to spend the next 5 minutes mentioning them all. Uh, what I really should say is that I probably actually read the best piece of advice that I ever received in a philosophy book, and it's I don't know if you grew up reading philosophy. I'm a big fan. It allows us to stand on the shoulders of giants because they took years to understand these topics, and then they wrote about it, and I can just read their insights in an hour. It's an incredible efficiency mindset that we can activate. But it was either Jeremy Bentham or Kant or someone. It's the duty. The duty of humans is to minimize suffering as much as possible, and that's also kind of a Buddhist perspective too, or in the sense that Buddhists say suffering is part of life. In this, our duty is to minimize that suffering. And it sounds like that's way too broad scale on first glance, but if we apply it to business, if we don't understand our customers' pain points, their suffering, we cannot apply a solution to that suffering. If we don't understand how to minimize the suffering in a therapeutic sense, we can't design solutions in order to address these clinical needs, atherosclerosis, aging. And in a sense, this actually fans out into so many different avenues of humanitarian thinking as well. If we can reinvest our profits once we become successful entrepreneurs into humanitarian efforts, then we can minimize suffering, provide others the opportunity to build their own corporations, to build their own ideas up. And all we're doing is wanting to help each other. Minimize suffering is this kernel that can start it can launch 1,000 ships, as far that old saying goes. So that's probably the best business advice that I've read anyway, was to minimize the suffering of humans. We can start from there and then apply that framework to a business sense, to what we do as humans on a daily basis, into so many different avenues of life. And I hope that I do that. And it's hard because sometimes you're on the freeway and you get cut off by somebody and you really want to just lay down on the horn, but they're having a bad day too. That they're not intentionally obstructing you, and so the recognition that they are suffering, that it's within my best interest to accept them in their way, and being able to try to minimize that suffering by not laying on the horn, not getting really ticked off. It sets us all in a better mood, and hopefully for a better a life in general. I mean, better society. Yeah. And so I don't mean to belabor that point too hard, but yeah, the minimizing of suffering, I think, is a great framework.
I've been asking this question for several years. I never really think I hear the same answer twice. And I can honestly say, David, I've never heard a version of what you just shared, which I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. That was very insightful. And thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to do so.
All right. So let's kick around AI a little bit. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but, maybe expand it a little bit on your view of AI. And then inside the firm, how you see it leveraging your firm and maybe the industry that you're in as well.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Where AI can't assist is probably a shorter answer than how helpful AI is going to be. In the longevity space, people are already utilizing AI for drug discovery, as well as digital twins, which is a fun thing. It's to generate kind of a twin of the existing real world in a computer, and then being able to model things so that we don't have to test thousands and thousands of times. We can just test in a computer thousands of times at a much more rapid pace. Digital twins are going to assist in so many different avenues. AI is, in a long story short, AI in our industry is going to be able to accelerate the process from point A all the way to commercialization. The entire process is going to be accelerated. And as well, once we hit artificial general intelligence, AGI, I've heard that we are already able to achieve a 4-year-old's brain without hallucination. That is a scary thought, but it's also an incredibly exciting thought, because a 4-year-old is not capable of much. I say that only to say we are only a year or two away from a 10-year-old, and then maybe a year or two away from a high schooler, And so we have now to prepare for this coming AI revolution. And I know we're at time. Sorry about that. So yes, AI is definitely going to be utilized internally once AGI comes out, and as well in all avenues of longevity. There's no avenue that it will not touch that I can see anyway.
Interesting. Okay, so if you want to take us on a journey into the future, let's do that as it relates to the business. What is your vision for the future of Vertical Longevity Pharma?
That's a really good point. Yep. So right now we are so focused on the atherosclerosis story, the clogging of arteries, but we should have that take a step back. What does it look like? Once we get approval for our clinical indication, we're going to expand out. We're going to expand out into all the other age-related diseases that we can positively affect, and then we can actually create an oral formulation, so a pill form of this, which is thermostable, so it's room temperature stable. If you remember your vaccines, a lot of them have to be refrigerated upon transport. We can eliminate that whole process so we can get into the deepest, wettest jungles, the driest deserts. We can produce this at a scale that everybody can access it. We want to democratize the access to longevity, and we can produce this at 15 cents a dose. And so we are going to expand globally. We're going to make sure that everybody, regardless of socio-demographic position, economic backing, doesn't matter. You have access to something that can save your life. That is what we're going to apply, is if I live long enough, talking about longevity, to every single therapy that we come up with afterwards. It's got to be strategically thought of from the get-go. This has to be scalable. This has to be accessible, and it has to affect longevity. And so that's broad term. So initially start off with the FDA application, approval, expand the indications, make it accessible everywhere, and then do that for every other therapy that we ever develop.
What an exciting journey you're on.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Geez. Yeah, we're trying to get from 0 to 1 right now, and that is, so far as I hear, the most difficult aspect.
Yeah, but it's compelling. And that's the other part of being an entrepreneur is you have to have a compelling vision for the future to drive you through the dark days of the now. So that's great. If someone would like to connect with you, David, maybe learn more about Vertical Longevity Pharma, how would they do that?
Well, it's easy enough to search my name. I am probably one of 2 David Scieszkas that exist in the United States. LinkedIn is a great way. I'm right now, unfortunately, I think 2 weeks behind because I have to tailor each message to the person that actually reaches out to me. Also, you can get in contact with my email. It's dscieszka@velopharma.com. Try to respond as frequently to both LinkedIn and email. Happy to talk to anybody about this. The more people that understand that longevity is an indication we can target therapeutically, the better. We need to optimize our longevity. So even if it's not about my company, I love talking about this stuff. So anybody that feels like just talking about longevity, biotech, anybody I can help out, feel free to reach out to me, LinkedIn or email.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of our show. I really do. I enjoyed it, and I feel like I learned something as well from our conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you and being on your show.
And thanks to the audience, you're part of the show too. And David's episode will join our catalog of almost 1,600 episodes that we've done over the years. If you happen to be an Orange County-based entrepreneur or you lead an Orange County-based nonprofit and you too would like to be a guest on our program, it's easy. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Let me know of your interest. Between Haley and our producer and myself, we'll be happy to get you ready to be on a future episode so you too can share your story with our audience. And until the next time we all have a chance to be together, I hope each of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.